Well, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in with the C-19 bullshit. And what it really is for me is I don't really hear hardly anybody saying exactly what I'm thinking about this. So I'm like, fuck it, why not? How about just a few of my ideas on the subject, okay? The C-19, we all know what it is. I hear if you say it on YouTube. Nowadays, they found a new reason to, demonetize you or, flag your video or whatever the fuck they're doing. But the YouTube overlords aren't happy with that, just as they weren't happy with a lot of the shit I was doing on my Autopsy 87 channel, but here we are. Okay, and exactly what I wanted to talk about here is the reaction to a lot of the shit that's been going on. Now, everybody knows what's been going on with the C-19 and shutdowns and our brilliant leaders in Washington giving us the stimulus package. When I say giving us a stimulus package, that's what they call. That's what we should be calling the fucking that we received. 2.2 trillion plus over 4 trillion in Fed spending. A lot of money being thrown at this thing. Of course, if you are a taxpayer, you get like $1,200 plus $500 for every kid. But what I specifically wanted to talk about is all like the blue check marks, all the progressive-minded types on Twitter and on YouTube and probably on Facebook. I don't use Facebook, but all over the place. The narrative here seems to be that the results of all this, where you have, I think it's over 30 million filing for unemployment now. I heard someone say that the unofficial number right now is something like 17% unemployment, and going to be rising the longer we shut down, obviously. It's just when you look at all the things that are going on, when you look at all the shutdowns, when you look at the stimulus, when you look at all the actions taken by these governors, by DC, by the Senate, by the House of Representatives, by the Federal Reserve, when you look at all of the things that go into this, it never ceases to amaze me how people can overlook all of that and blame capitalism. Capitalism can take the blame for trillions of dollars in spending, Fed printing, in inflation, in taxes, and in, once again, the middle class Americans, the everyday motherfuckers, the blue collar dudes like myself, and blue collar dudes and ladies like myself, who work for a living, and we're not rich, we're not one percenters, we're not, well off. We're going to be the ones that really suffer the consequences of this. Not that rich people can't suffer the consequences of this. Obviously, physically they can, and even in terms of wealth, there's going to be a lot of definitely small businesses, but even mid-sized businesses that are going to go under after all this. The problem is that people can look at this and say, you see, how in the richest country in the world can we have, 30 million people filing for unemployment? Which is insane, because the reason they're unemployed is because the government made them stay home. Now, what your take is on the shutdowns is really neither here nor there. You at least have to be aware enough to know this wasn't a free market phenomenon. All right? It wasn't these businesses were just, just like fucking over their employees and saying, get out of here, we don't need you no more. Which, by the way, businesses have every right to do that. It's another dumb thing that comes out of these loans about how you get the loans if you basically promise not to fire your workers. Well, the thing is, in a lot of situations, firing your workers is what's going to help your business. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but, a lot of these places have, they have to cut back. And if you can't get your loan because you have to cut back, well, then that's going to dump your business. Obviously, that's going to incentivize you to keep your workers. It's not a natural market incentive either. That is a government incentive. You get these loans if you don't fire your workers. Well, like I say, the sad reality is some of these workers have to go in certain places. You can't if you had a restaurant, you're a restaurant owner, and you had 100 people working for you. Well, this is a really bad time for the restaurant business. If you can open and you're doing takeout orders, you might have to really cut back. Well, then now you're not going to be able to get your loan from the government because the government says you have to keep all your workers. This is one part of your stipulation. The other part of the stipulations I'm hearing from this thing is that you don't have to pay it back if your business goes under. Well, who the fuck wouldn't want to take a giant chunk of this thing and basically pocket it, or find some way to legally pocket it, which I'm sure there's plenty of loopholes and workarounds in there, and be able to do that, and then you just close down the business and you come out with a big chunk of change. And the thing is, why wouldn't you? The Fed is already saying it's going to throw an endless supply of money at this. Like, Christ. Anyways, to my specific point about capitalism, sorry, I'm going to be chasing rabbits, because I'm not doing scripts or anything like that. I'm just going off the top of my goddamn head. But I'm seeing like the Green Party vice president on Twitter, or Jill Stein's running mate, I believe, says, now it should be clear why the government only provided a measly $1,200 check. The plan was to drive hungry and desperate people back to work. That's capitalism, folks. Enjoy your freedom. See, I'm seeing takes like this all the time. You see, what capitalism is a system of not only profits, but of losses. Okay, you have to take the loss. That's what capitalism is. Okay, so one way you know this isn't capitalism is because the losses are socialized. This is something progressives have said for a long time. The thing is, they're right on this. It's another thing about progressives is there's so many of these things that they're right on, but then you ask them what their solutions are, and they're abhorrent. Their solutions are more of what the actual problem is. See, a progressive would look at that and say, no, you're absolutely right. We can't have socialized losses. What we need is socialized losses, not just for the wealthy, not just for big businesses, but we need socialized losses for everybody. Well, no, you don't. You see, the socialized losses are the problem. It's exactly what we did in 2008. It's what we're doing now. It's what we're going to do if we go on into another recession, a decade from now. If this one doesn't collapse the dollar, then we go on to the next one. The next one will probably collapse the dollar. It's at least going to hurt the dollar. Nobody can deny the inflation is rising. The value of your dollar, your purchasing power, is going to go to shit. Every time one of these happens, it's going to take a big chunk out of the purchasing power, especially with the Federal Reserve printing and spending the way that they are. They're basically buying up all this debt, treasury bonds and such. But is this capitalism? It's not capitalism. And this is another point that I got to make, because I've heard this from people. When I say this isn't capitalism, the criticism that I get is like, well, that's just like a communist saying it's not really communism. It's not, the Soviet Union wasn't real communism. You know how communists say that. They're like, oh, well, the Soviet Union or Cuba or Mao's China and all that, that's not really communism. Well, here's the difference. And here's what I see as a difference. Because I in a way, I can understand where you're coming from. Because I'm a bit sympathetic to the people who are, in the traditional Marx take on communism, where it's a stateless, classless society. I understand that take, and in that sense, then no, Russia, or the Soviet Union, Mao's China, Cuba, even all those places are not actual communism under that particular definition. But the problem is there's a huge inherent flaw in Marx's idea of communism. And that is that the state is supposed to absorb all of this power and set up a system and then dissolve itself. That is a glaring flaw, and that's the reason it's failed every time it has been tried, and every time it will be tried, it's going to fail, because you cannot trust human beings, a small group of people with such an insane amount of power over the populace, and then expect them to just will it over to the people. It doesn't happen. The thing is, that same sort of flaw does not exist in laissez-faire or free market capitalism. That same flaw doesn't exist because the huge government is the problem in the first place. If you want to talk about there's a flaw in capitalism, and the flaw is that at times it can be heartless. People could exercise some kind of that power dynamic over other people because of the maybe insane amount of wealth that they have. If you want to argue plenty of those things are flaws of capitalism, that's fine. But I don't understand how you can look at this system and even pretend that this is capitalism in any sort of like free market fashion. This is a corporatist system. That's what we have. That's what we've had for a long time. This isn't new. This isn't something new under Donald Trump. This isn't something that started under Obama or George Bush. This has been going on for a long time. A long time. The 20th century really fucked this country in a lot of ways. My take on this, be very wary of the people who are looking at this and criticizing the free market. There's a lot of this. Progressives are horrible at this. There's a lot of criticism of the free market here when there's very little. Every year we have less and less free market to even point at. You have relatively free markets, but what you have is success in this country despite the huge federal and state overreach that goes on in every aspect of the market. It's regulated, it's taxed. There's so much government and so many things. It's crazy to me to see so many people be able to point to that, especially now when you look at all these things that are happening. Like, you have the government literally forcing businesses to shut down. You have government imposing rules on all these businesses, so when all these people go unemployed, you can't reasonably look at that and say, oh, this is what we get for late stage capitalism. It isn't capitalism. The airlines going under because the Federal Reserve set interest rates artificially low for, they never really went back up after 2008, guys. And all this did for businesses, and this even before that, is it incentivizes spending instead of saving. Well, the mark of a good economy is what we can save. In a good economy, we would all have savings, but we don't. Everybody in this country is fucking broke, and not only broke, they're in debt. You have over $17 trillion in personal debt among American citizens, and plus the government debt. The government doesn't have any fucking money. The government's over $24 trillion in debt now. The government owes an insane amount of money, and all it can do, the only money the government has, is money that it either steals from you or it prints and devalues and inflates, and that's a tax you can't fucking vote on. And don't look at that shit and tell me that that's capitalism. But one thing's for sure, I can guarantee all of you that there's going to be more to come. I'm going to find the time to do this sort of thing because it's drove me crazy. I haven't had a channel for about 2 years now. I get some of it out on the goddamn podcast, but it's just, I don't know, I need an outlet to voice some of this stuff because I just see so much shit that just pisses me the fuck off, and I need somewhere to put it. So look forward to more of this sort of thing. I plan on doing some stuff about like precious metals. I plan on doing some stuff probably that even involves an economic take on things. More of a things on the encroaching, just flat out fucking tyranny of the state. Taxes. I got plenty to bitch about. Been holding on to it for a while. Plenty to bitch about, so stay tuned.